What's up? I'm Ayla.
I'm Beth Ann.
And this is Let's Talk BL, a boys love podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. It's Sunday, Series Sunday, the day of the week where we talk all about one series and one series only. Chock full of spoilers. So if you have not watched I Promised You the Moon, it's probably for the best.
It's probably for the best. And I mean, look, it's my personal opinion is probably for the best. And so just listen to this episode. You'll get to know what happens, and then you don't have to go through what I went through.
Yeah. I feel like I Promised You the Moon was the most polarizing second season that has ever happened.
I don't know if it was polarizing because I didn't really see anybody split. Like, I didn't see anybody say, oh, I loved this.
I loved it.
I didn't see anybody say that they loved it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people were very upset and angry because it doesn't follow your typical second season BL narrative of like...
No, that's not what makes me mad about it. What makes me mad about it is not, I don't, like, it could have been sad. That would have been fine with me. What makes me mad about it is that they completely backtracked on all of the characters and changed it. They changed these two people.
Yeah.
These people that you learned about. It was like you were introduced to two brand new people. They were not the same people, which happens through life. Yeah. You change, but this is not a you move through life second season. This is literally we see them go into college. And when we see them go into college, which is right after we've met them, and I Told Sunset About You, they're already completely different people. They backtrack. Honestly, look, Goy, I love you. Please don't take this as an insult. This was incredibly poorly written.
Interesting.
Incredibly poorly written. What they did is they took this show and they took this story and they tried to make it a BL. They tried to change it into something that it was not. I hated this. I hated this show.
I loved it because I think that, yeah, we all change, especially from high school to college.
Right.
When you go from living, especially in these like small hometowns where you have the same friends from like 0 to 18, you then leave, especially for this group of friends, because Tay and OAO went to Bangkok, which they talk about, where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm like going to the big city.
But the core of who you are as a person doesn't change. A coin flip, the way that they changed like a coin flip in this show.
I feel like Tay was pretty much the same character the whole way through because...
Oh, I disagree. I disagree completely.
In the first...
But first we need to get into like the details.
Yeah.
This is not time to talk about the show. All you need to know going into this, I absolutely hated the show. I think it's complete garbage. Beth Ann loved it for reasons unknown that make no sense, that are wrong.
Okay, so it's 6 episodes, which will be available on Viki soon.
Yes. So if you didn't get a chance to watch this when it was originally released, you had no way to watch it for a while.
Yeah, it came out on Vimeo first. So international fans had to buy episode by episode, which for maybe not this series, but I Promised You them, or I Told Sunset About You was worth it. And so you had to buy every single episode. It's available on Netflix in, I think, Asia.
Right. So not in the West.
Right. But for international fans outside of Thailand, it could be available on Netflix. It could be available on Viki. I Told Sunset About You is available on Viki now. I Promised You the Moon is coming soon.
Yes. So you're about to be able to watch this if you have not already.
It was made by Nadal.
R.I.P. Pour one out for the lost homies.
So sad. Nadal gave us some like real good stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it stars as OAO, PP Crit, the PP Crit.
The one and only.
And then as Tay, Bilkin. Oh, Bilkin.
Oh, BK.
Yes.
Together, the infamous BKPP. You know what's interesting about BKPP? I feel like I see so many people that are fans of BKPP and know who they are, like them as a ship, like them as celebrities, have never watched I Told Sunset About You or I Promised You the Moon. Like, didn't even know those shows existed.
Yeah,
which I think is crazy. And this was even before they like went out on their own and started really doing the music thing. I would see that.
Yeah, I think they're more known in Thailand now for the music.
Right, but I mean like international fans, like on Twitter and stuff, and like on all the like the Discord and the communities, like people knew who BK and PP were and they liked them as a ship and they liked them as celebrities. Like they liked watching their interviews and them at appearances. but they had never seen I Promise You the Moon or I Told Sunset About You. I mean, or before I Promise You the Moon came out, but first I Told Sunset About You, because it was so inaccessible to foreign fans. And so I think that that's why, like, a lot of people know who BKPP are, but because you can't actually watch their BLs anywhere. You can't even watch My Ambulance unless
because they were all Line TV shows,
right?
And even they weren't even.
And My Ambulance is on Netflix, but not in the West.
Yeah, they weren't on Line TV for international fans,
right? So I like it's BKPP is a very, very interesting
tracks.
Like those just Bilkin and PP, not even as BKPP, but like Bilkin and PP are very interesting celebrities in the like Western fandom, I feel like, because we all, or a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people know who they are. Pretty much everybody knows who Bilkin is and knows who PP is, and they know they are BL actors. They know that they have been BL actors and they have been in a BL, but they haven't actually seen their stuff, which I just think is fascinating that like you can accumulate such fans and some of them have literally not even seen the show that you were in. It's very interesting to me. I just think it's an interesting dynamic that
BKPP transcends.
They transcend.
All the
They do. It feels right. They do. It feels right. Okay, so synopsis time. Tae and OAO, now in a blissful relationship for over a year, bid farewell to Phuket and head to Bangkok for their university lives. This time, however, as days pass, Tae begins to feel differently towards OAO as he spends more time with his university friends. To make matters worse, Tae begins to develop feelings for Jai, his senior in the drama club, Okay, grammar here's off. Making which OAO starts to notice. Will Tae and OAO cross these challenges and succeed in their love? Okay, spoiler. First of all, grammar was a little off, but otherwise really good synopsis.
Yeah.
They do, despite the ending of this show, I would argue they do not succeed in their love.
No.
It's a garbage relationship. Everything about this is garbage. I feel very strongly about this because this upset me so much. Yeah. And that's why we didn't do this series Sunday for a really long time because I was like, I can't talk about it. It makes me too mad. I was like, it makes me too upset to have to talk about this show.
Yeah, Tae is irredeemable because we've talked about this many times before that in I Told Sunset About You, you don't blame either boy for figuring out who they are and
this
how
has
they
always
figured
been
it
my
out.
thing. Like, and that's always how I describe to people why I liked I Told Sunset About You and why I feel so strongly about it is that
there were no sides.
It's not one boy acting poorly to the other. They both hurt each other in different ways.
Yeah.
And at first glance, Tae can be made to seem as though he's hurting OAO more. But if you really watch that show, a lot of that is OAO is honestly like unfairly dictating the way that Tae should be acting and unfairly dictating how quickly Tae should be moving through his own discovery of himself. So they both hurt each other in different ways. And it's what I love so much about I Told Sunset About You is that I felt so emotionally for both of them in very different ways. And I could see both of their perspectives and I could see where both of them, because it was so wonderfully made and so beautifully written that it wasn't, they did a very good job in making you understand the journey that they were going through individually as well as how that journey led them together.
Yeah.
And so it was really beautiful because you had who was very sure of himself. He knew what he wanted. He knew who he was. He knew all of these things. He was just suspicious of Tae because of what happened when they were younger. And then you had Tae, who really, this is the first time, and I Told Sunset About You, that he's discovering that, like, he can have these kinds of feelings for a boy. And, like, he's really, because we find out he's had this sort of lifelong crush on this girl, and he really, like, he was going to follow her to university and all of this stuff, right? And so you watch him go through this journey of, like, what is happening to me? You watch him do that, and he makes mistakes. He trips up. He gets things wrong. He does it poorly, which is so true to life. Like, that happens to everybody. But then you watch him go through this character growth. And all of this growth in I Promised You the Moon is completely demolished. And not only is it demolished, they backtrack it, which is so frustrating. And I don't feel true to life. And I don't feel true to this story. And I don't feel as though it's true to the meaning behind this, like the series as a whole. I feel like what they did is they took these two characters and they made them into something that they thought would be a more palatable BL. That they thought would be right. It's basically one boy's in the wrong and the other one is in the right. And I hate it. And especially for Tay, it doesn't make sense because even when Tay was going through something in the first season, he was never a mean person. He is a mean person in I Promised You the Moon. But at his core, and that's why I'm saying I think this is garbage, and I think it's like seeing two completely different people, because even in the way that you see Tay interact with other people in I Told Sunset About You, he's not a mean person at his core. He makes mistakes, he says the wrong things, he's inconsiderate at times, but he was never downright mean.
What did he do that was mean?
Oh, so much. So he's super mean to his first roommate, who, by the way, is
Mark
from GMMTV.
The new up-and-coming
new
Mark Packin.
Which I did not realize. So he's super mean to him. They first meet, and he's like pretty rude to him whenever Mark, I forget his name in the show.
Yeah, I don't remember
either.
But
when he basically is like, look, man, like, I don't want to be your friend. This is just a dorm situation. And like, Mark isn't necessarily mean about it. He's just telling him. And Tay is like, becomes mean to him and like based on that rejection instead of like being sad or being bummed or something. He's actively mean. He is actively mean not only to O, because he's just being mean to O.
Right.
It, like when as you start moving through this, he is just being manipulative and just mean. Not that he's doing the wrong thing accidentally. He never even feels guilty about what he's doing. He's just mean. And even when those two boys were like fighting or like they were both going through something and they felt betrayed by the other, he was never mean to him.
He like very much takes out on other people what he thinks they should act like. He's like, when O changes his major, it takes him some time to like really wrap his mind around it, because that's the thing they've always done, right? Like that's the thing that they've aspired to together.
Which that I actually understood his reaction in that moment, because that was a parallel to the first season, where in the first season, whenever they're kids and they get the little stage play, the exact same scenario plays out. But it was the meanness of it, right? Because in the first season, like, sure, he gets hurt and he can act inconsiderately, but he's never malicious. And in this season, in I Promise You the Moon, Tay is malicious.
He's very much a selfish person. Like there's no kind of compassion or understanding that he has for anybody else in his life. In this season, he's like, I have thoughts and feelings about how I act and about how you should act, and you should follow those paths that I've set out for you in my brain. And so when things change, right, like this series is very much about change, like how people change, how our love changes, how life changes throughout the course, especially in your 20s. Things change. Well, and so he much.
Also, so he gets mad. Goy is actually in this season, and she's his senior, and she, when she graduates, and they like, you see them throughout the show, like they have this little group of friends and they go and audition for things. And when she says, I'm gonna go be a flight attendant, I'm not gonna act, I'm not gonna do all this, not only is he upset, because there are some people that just don't deal with change or change well.
Right.
It's okay to be upset about change. Change is not necessarily fun, and if it affects you very deeply, it doesn't make you a mean person, a bad person, whatever. But he maliciously tries to hurt her for that decision.
Right. He like has thoughts about how she's like giving up, because he's already experienced this with O, where O changed his major and he was really upset by that because he took it personally. And then I think when when her character changes her path, because he's like, okay, it's hard, whatever, but you should still be pursuing this thing that you're passionate about. And she's like, no, your dreams can change.
Basically,
the way that you pursue things, you can be more realistic, right? Some people become more realistic and they're like, as much as I love acting, I know it's not real for me. So maybe I do become a flight attendant, and maybe I do then come home and do plays every once in a while.
Or some people realize that passion is better for them as a hobby. So like I love soccer, and I was like so dead set on like I'm going to work in soccer. And I made it happen for myself. And then I realized after doing it that when you add the work component to it, it was no longer fun for me. And I mourned the loss of this thing that used to be fun for me.
There's a psychology term for that.
What is it?
It's called over-justification.
And so I was like, I got out of that world because I very much wanted soccer to continue to be fun for me because I love it as a sport. I love being a fan. I love being in the stands. I didn't want to have to think about the work part of it.
Right.
And so I got out of the industry because I was like, for myself, I would much rather find joy in this.
Right.
And so some people that just happens to them, right? And I'm sure that like some of my friends who were like, you know, thought that I had made it because I was working, you know, alongside a team in the MLS, right? And that I had made it. We're probably like, what the hell's wrong with you?
Why would you give
this up?
Yeah.
And for me, it was because I wanted to find joy in it. So some people that's just how they view things. And so, but again, it's less about him being disappointed. He then says things to her that are like he actively tries to hurt her for her decision, and you see her feel very hurt.
Right.
And the other thing, and again, this is just not who he is at his core, because people change throughout their lives, but the core of who they are as a person, from high school to college, from middle school to high school, from the core of who you are, typically does not change that drastically. You don't just overnight wake up one day and decide in your heart you are that kind of person. That just doesn't happen. That's why I feel like this is garbage, and the way they wrote it is garbage, because if they wanted to show a change in his actions or something, that's fine, but don't change who he is as a person. Like, that is why I think they took this and tried to make it more of like a typical BL storyline where it's like one boy versus the other kind of thing.
I'm trying to remember, in I Told Sunset About You, it was O that came back, right, in high school, because
well, so they had just like gone to different high schools, and they ended up like they went to different schools, and they had decided they weren't friends anymore. They had always gone to different schools, and then they decided they weren't friends anymore because we had this whole like childhood fight over a stage play.
Yes.
And then they ended up in the same college prep like tutoring class, and that's how they like reconnected.
And that friend group was O's friend group, right?
Yes, the one that we see, the friend group that we see, as far as Tay, rude. As far as Tay, we only ever see the girl that he has a little crush on and his brother.
Right.
Those are and his mom, right? Like as far as like his community around him, that's really all you see. And then he becomes friends with O's friends.
Right.
It's kind of how it happens.
Yeah, I think that's where I kind of understand where Tay is coming from in I Promised You the Moon, because we see him in the context of his comfort, right? His home, his mom and his brother, people like even in I Told Sunset About You, when he's having this crisis of faith, he has his brother to ground him. He never grounds himself. He never figures it out for himself.
But again, he's not a mean person.
No, his brother has to kind of help him along that path. And I think that when he gets to college and he has that conversation after he and O break up, he has that conversation with his roommate where he's like, you wouldn't understand. I've lost all my friends because like I've been a bad person, and understandably so. And his roommate is like, I understand. Like I went through the same thing. Like you're not alone in this, but you have isolated yourself in this environment because like he didn't have his mom and his brother to be like, to help ground him. And so I think he gets to a place where other people around him change. And maybe at this point he had like just figured out who he was within the context of like him and O, so that when he went to college and he gets introduced to new people and he starts pursuing what he wants to, and then his like security blanket, which was O, kind of got pulled out from under him because of his own actions, he was like, oh, I have to figure out who I am within myself not based on what other people want. Because I've known people like that where
I think you're being too generous. I will say, I think you're being far too generous with him.
Where other people are like, you have to try really hard because I want to try, like, I need somebody to look up to, right? Like, there are those people in life who are like, if you're not trying hard, then what's the point in me trying hard? And I think his seniors, who he looked up to, because that's where it started, is that he came into college being friends with people who were seniors he hadn't seen their struggle, right? Like, he takes it out on Goy, not knowing what she had gone through, and he only sees little bits of it where he's like, why are you the director? I thought you wanted to be an actress. And she was like, well, I did try acting. Like, you learn her story slowly where she's like, I did try out for things, but he didn't really see that struggle and see her go
like
through those
in
things.
That she learned more of who she was and where her strengths were and what she enjoyed.
Right.
And so, like, but again, all of these things that you're talking about shouldn't, in a real world and in good writing, affect who he is at his core. Like, who you are as a person doesn't change based on when your behaviors, your interests, your whatever, like, you go through a hard time. None of those things change who you are at your core. So that's the problem that I have with it. Because, for example, the action that is completely unforgivable is when he uses O to, like, get in the right headspace for acting. That is something that Tay as a person just flat out would never do. And you see this when in the first season, he's very, like, transparent with people about, I had this moment with you, this intimacy, this whatever, but I don't want to be with you. Right. And that causes a lot of the problems in the first season is that
you don't think that moment where he's with that girl in the field and he's realized that he has feelings for O, but he's still very much in this relationship with the girl.
Well, they were never in a relationship, right? That's the whole point of the first season.
In like they're in a relationship, not like dating, but like they have like they have just a relationship where they're trying to figure out, she obviously likes him, he likes her, but they haven't taken the next step towards like becoming like boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. But they're in that field and like I think they start to touch each other, or like she's drawing something, he's drawing something.
No, yeah, they don't touch each other. What happens is they're drawing, and she is drawing because she's the artist. That's her whole story, is like she's this artist and she wants to go to university and like for drawing, and that's why she's like, I'm not going to date anyone. We're just friends. Like, she's very clear with him. We are just friends. And then she's like, pick a color. Right. And this is where the color theory in I Told Sunset About You comes in. And he picks the color that represents O. And that's when he really starts to realize, like, oh, this is what's happening. And the difference between that and what he did, and I Promised You the Moon, is he already knew where he was at. It wasn't that he was discovering where he was going.
Right.
It's that he knew without a doubt, unequivocally, that this is where he is, and he maliciously and actively uses O to get where he needed to be, even though, so like with his little girl, he like pretty much like told her what was what pretty quick once he had figured it out. And so the difference here is he had already figured it out and was still using O. And that's the difference.
Right, because he very much didn't want to break up with O, as when after they like have the climax of like O has really figured out there were more feelings than just like acting workshop.
Tay.
Yeah. And so O has figured out this whole situation. And when O is like, we're going to break up, and Tay is like, I never wanted that. And O is like, that's not your choice. Like, you clearly have fallen for another person, and there's more to the story.
And it's less about him falling for this other person, because I don't think truly Tay ever really fell for Jai. I think that what happened there is he got caught up in so like being attracted to somebody and wanting to be like physically intimate with them is very different than falling for someone. And I think that's what happened to him, is that it was this like exciting opportunity to be intimate with someone else. And he took it. And so that's the step of like him taking it and him understanding where he is, of like, I don't care about this other person enough to want to only be with them in practice, because everybody in a like semi long-term relationship like if you've been together even a year, you're like, oh, they're cute, right? Or like I would totally make out with them, but you never would actually, because this other person that you're with means so much to you and too much to you to ever even consider actually physically being with anyone else, right? It's like you joke about it, and every human is like attracted to other people that they're not in a relationship with. But that's the difference, is by the time you are physically with someone, at that point, what you are feeling and what you have justified to yourself, like what is happening in your brain, is this other person doesn't matter enough, or you are not emotionally attached enough to this other person to only want them. And so that's the difference there, is like, it's not that he fell for him, it's that he fell out of love with O. I don't think it was that he fell for Jai. I think it was that he had already fallen out of love with O.
Right. Yeah, I think they coincided at the same time. I think he fully had fallen for Jai, because they have that conversation at the bar after the play is over, where he's like, okay, now that the play is over and I'm no longer needing to have this connection with Jai, he's like, but I want it, because Jai then says, oh, it was only about the play.
Right.
And Tay is so hurt, which is why O figures it out completely, because they're singing on stage. They're standing there singing on stage, and
O is singing to Tay and Tay is singing to Jai.
Yeah. And so he realizes in that moment, he's like, oh, because I don't think there was any intimate connection with Jai until that kiss, until that moment. And then he like, something awoke in him. I mean, they did have that moment at the temple where they were hiding,
when
and
they were hiding,
they like have that stare, but I don't think he quite understood what that meant.
Oh, I think he did. He's already been through this. He is written as a terrible person in this. He fully knew, but that's the thing, is he wasn't. And that's what made me so mad about this, is that it seemed to me as though the team behind it tried to turn these characters in this story into something that it wasn't.
So then when they break up and we get this time jump, we have this moment where Tay has gotten everything that he set out to get, right? Yes. He's famous, he's well known, he's acting, and O is thriving in his world and doing his own thing.
He's in advertising, because like we see him in school be this like almost like advertising prodigy, right? Like he knows the answers and has figured out all of these different things so quickly, like ahead of all his other classmates and stuff. Right.
And by this point, you are invested in O as that kind of character where like you want what he wants. Like you want the best for him, because I think that's the only way you can really,
because he's the only person that they didn't change.
Yeah, he's the only reason you can digest them ending up together, because when they have the confrontation after Tay has invited him to see his thesis play, and Tay and O is like, what are you trying to do with this? Like this doesn't make up for anything. Like our past and how good things were has no bearing on how you acted and what our future is. And in that moment, you can tell that like he has resolved all of his feelings. Like that's what I do appreciate about the writing in this story, is that they showed you that O had resolved all of his feelings from the breakup, from everything. Because when he starts to see like the magazine cover and the appearance on TV, like he's happy for his friend. Like
he's happy for him.
Right. He's gotten back to a place where he's like, I can be happy for this person apart from.
Yeah. And he doesn't even, what's interesting and what I do feel like is very true to life, is that like he doesn't consider him his friend anymore, right? He's not happy for his friend. He's happy for this person that he knew, and he knew this person. Like and you see this once they do find each other again, is that they have to rebuild that friendship.
Yeah.
So O very clearly does not consider Tay even his friend, because they haven't had any contact. They're not even friends anymore. But O is at a place where he's like, oh, good for him. I know that's what he always wanted.
Yeah.
Not I'm happy, which I actually think is like very healthy, that he's like, because that whole like we'll stay friends after we break up thing is actually super unhealthy.
I feel like that's a lie. I don't know anyone.
It takes you a while.
Together.
So like I actually was like in this position, is like I was with someone and we broke up because they cheated on me. That's not why we broke up, actually. I just found out that happened, and it was just like I realized I wasn't like as upset about it as I should be. And then we it was a whole thing. And it like completely stopped talking, even though we had mutual friends, all this stuff, whatever. Like by the time we had the conversation of like, okay, this is over, it like we had already kind of, and then we just like weren't no longer speaking with mutual friends, all this stuff. And I was still like for a little bit kind of annoyed, like I don't even want to see his face kind of thing. And then years later, we had a mutual friend who was graduating, who had a graduation party out of town and was like, just so you know, I've invited both of you. You're both my friends, whatever, all this stuff. And because it was out of town and we had the same mutual friends who were friends with that mutual friend, there's only one car to ride in.
Right.
And I was like I remember being really nervous about it, being like, ooh, what's going to happen here? Because at that point I had no more feelings. Like this person wasn't my friend, but like I also didn't hate him.
Right. You say that you have no feelings, but you're like, but do I really not? Because I haven't interacted with him.
No, yeah, I don't think it was that I was nervous about my feelings. I was nervous about the way he was going to act.
Okay.
Because I was at that point I was already married. This is what I mean by like years, like a year's difference is I was already like, I was married. I was good. I was happy.
Right.
And so I didn't hate him anymore, but I also just like, he wasn't my friend. So I didn't necessarily care about him.
You didn't know who he was.
And so like all of like, I was more nervous about how he was going to act than how I was going to act. And at that, and so like these kinds of things do happen where like, and he kind of, I found out was in the same place where he was like literally he got in the car and was like, oh, hey, I saw you got married because we have so many mutual friends that like Facebook is a thing. And he was like, your wedding pictures are really nice. Like, and we had a perfectly normal conversation and we like talk, like we didn't necessarily hang out when we were at this graduation party out of town, but we like talked to each other when we played games together and like all of this stuff. And like
you were friendly, but you weren't friends.
Right. We didn't necessarily make friends with it, but on those days we were friends, right? We fell back into the same like easy conversations that we always had before because we were friends before we kind of got together. And all of this stuff, and it was like, oh, okay, we are friends again. And so I actually have been in that situation, but the whole like we just broke up but it's okay because even though we're not dating, we're still friends, like that's so unhealthy for like if you're for both people in order to be able to resolve their own feelings. So that's why I feel like what they did with O in this case was very, very healthy for him.
They separated them completely, which was
and
really
O
great.
did that because you see a little bit towards like right after they've broken up where like Tay is kind of trying to at least talk to O and O just like shuts it down completely.
I mean, O blocks him on the phone, which is why when they have that meeting again, O goes home and is like trying to process how he feels about the potential of like reconnecting, not even getting back together.
Because Tay makes it very clear he wants to like go to lunch with him and grab a coffee and like I want to be friends again. Like he makes it very clear.
And so O unblocks him and he realized Tay has like texted him for the past like year and he's like, okay, what? Like O, who was like the real like hurt party in this situation, the only one that was like hurt. Actual victim, he was able to have this healing in this process where they could start over because that's what the conversation is. That's where I got to at the end of this show, whereas everything was on O's terms, and that's the only way that I could reconcile them getting back together is that
I still think it makes no sense. Like that's why I say like the writing is bad is because I think that doesn't make sense because you even see, and I appreciated this at the time. It was one of the only points in the show that I was happy is that it wasn't romantic at first. When they first reconnected, it was very much like, oh, they're just friends again.
Yeah.
Right. And it was nice to see because all of a sudden you flash back to I Told Sunset About You when they were just friends first and they were having fun and they were just being friends, which was like so nice.
Yeah.
And so when they first reconnect, they're just for a very long time, they're just friends again.
Yeah.
And it even takes Tay a long time to like admit to, oh, like actually I want this to be romantic. Like at first it's very much just platonic, like just friendly. And that's what I was like, that was the first time that I was happy about it because it made me happy that like O got his friend back and Tay got like, and that there was this friendship that like that had been, it wasn't even, I was less sad about their romantic relationship being destroyed and more upset about like this friendship that was destroyed throughout this process. And so when that friendship was being built back up, like that, I will say, was a really nice part of this. Right. But I think that it didn't make sense at the end there to turn it so romantic so fast, because I just feel like it didn't make any sense. And I think in the long term, like I cared about O as a person in the long term.
Right.
And I don't think that it's something that he deserves. Like he should not, like he deserves so much better than that. Because again, who is to say that Tay's not going to have the same 7-year itch?
Right.
Right? Like, fool me once.
I think, well, and this is such a trope in all dramas, is that first love. Like there's that special spot in your heart for first love, and it's irrational no matter who you are and who you become and how much you've changed and how much you've matured. Your first love will always have that spot. And I think that's where this story plays into, is that they were each other's true first love. And I think they're hanging on to that because they're small town boys and they've gone into the big city and they've accomplished these dreams. But kind of to your point, like who they are at their core is still those small town boys that want to be home. And so I think that's why a lot of times people will hang on to that first love, because they're like, oh, that was a time where things were just easier and they were so much clearer and I knew what I wanted. And so that first love trope is something that's like, it's rare, right? Like only 12% first love lasts. And so I think a lot of us couldn't conceptualize like what it would mean to break up with your first love and then years. We don't get as many years in between, but like I've known people that like years later will reconnect with that person that they were like high school or college sweethearts with. And, you know, they live out the rest of their life. But yeah, the like first love trope is strong.
I just don't believe at the point that, or what they've turned Tay into, and I Promise You the Moon, I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form he's good enough for I don't for a second believe he won't hurt him again. Because here's the thing that you see with Tay, when he gets what he wants at any little minor inconvenience in I Promise You this, now again, this is what's so frustrating, because this is not who he is in the first season, like at the core of who he is as a person. But as soon as there's a change in that, he lashes out. He doesn't just get disappointed or sad or whatever. He acts maliciously. And so imagine, because at this point they're also both only in like their mid-20s maybe, that they're getting back together. The way that life changed, like they got a long life to live and a lot of changes to go through and a lot of passions to discover and a lot, you know, life is, you know, even if they pass away kind of early, like let's say 60s or 70s, that's still a very long time for those two people to be living life together. I don't believe for one single second that at the first sign of inconvenience, Tay won't, based on who he has become, and I Promise You the Moon, act out again.
It's funny, you think I'm too generous with him in the second season. I think you're too generous with him in the first season, because he was really irrational in the first season, right? Like he was willing to give up all of his dreams to go to this university, to give up that spot for and when he did that in the first season, I was like, this boy is like an all or nothing. And in the second season, he's all or nothing in a really, really bad way. In the first season, he's all or nothing in like a harmless way, because he's kind of a teenager. And
but like, again, he wasn't mean. It's not that, like, I agree. Like in the first season, he acted badly, but I also think acted badly, but that's beside the point. Like Tay in the first season acted badly. The way that he acted with like, I think we all remember the like feel up scene, right? And the way that he acted after that and around that sucked. That was the worst possible. Like he absolutely acted terribly, and somebody should explain to him that he acted terribly, that like he did a bad thing. He like in the first season did bad things and acted badly, but he wasn't mean. The intent, I guess the difference here is the intention for me. He has kind of like I don't want to say clueless, but his intention is never malicious in the first season versus in the second season. Listen, if you don't, normally I'd be like, everybody has an opinion. I don't, I genuinely for most times, like, I want to hear it, and like I could be wrong, and I genuinely might not see it in the same light. And so when people explain it to me, I'm like, oh yeah, actually that makes sense, right? But in this case, if you don't think that what happened with O that night was backed by malice, I'm sorry, but you're flat out wrong. Like, that was straight up malice, and he knew what he was doing. He woke that boy up because he wanted to get a thing out of him.
Yeah. Well, and I think too is that he might have become mean in the second season because he didn't have anything grounding him. Like, I think there is something to be said about how he had people in his life, and when you become lonely and solitary, I think people become more mean because you're not given perspective. In the first season, when he was going through stuff, he had his family, he had his friends, and he talks about this when they break up in I Promised You the Moon. He's sitting there and he's being mean to his roommate, and his roommate's like, I get it. And you realize that he has alienated himself from all his friends because he feels alone. He feels like he's the only person going through something hard, that like nobody can understand him. There's no way, like he's on an island, and a lot of times once you've dug yourself that hole, you can't imagine that there's someone else that can help you. And I think that's part of the reason why he becomes the person he does in the second season, is because honestly, I view these two shows as two very individual things.
But it's the same people, though. That's the thing, is like, this is a continuation of these characters. So like they have to, right? They have to tie in together, unless you're talking about completely different characters that just live in the same universe, but that's not what the show is. It's the same characters in the same universe.
I think if you have allowance for people to change, I think that they can be two separate things. Like, I think back to who I was, especially as an adolescent, maybe not so much when I got into high school on, right? Or not high school, college on. Like, who I was in college is essentially who I became as an adult. But who I was as an adolescent, I was so different because I was an only child. I had lots of different individual friends. I didn't have a core group of friends. I was really annoying and really bratty. And so who I was as an adolescent in my hometown with the people that I like grew up with, I feel like is so different. And I even have people that I grew up with that I've reconnected as adults. And I'm like, we would have never been friends in like 18 to 0 range. Whereas now that we're adults, we're totally different. We act totally different. We have different perspectives. We understand that, like, when you're an adolescent, everything's all or nothing. It's like extremes. And so that's where I think that where you are from like 0 to 18 can be really different than who you are as an adult and as like a young adult. Kind of what we've seen with certain people in our society now, where they act really bad as children or as young adults. Like, the conversation is, do we then blame them as adults? Like, do we say, like, again, you can't be any different than who you were as like a 15-year-old?
I guess what I'm trying to explain is that's not what I'm saying. People change their actions, people change the way that they interact with the world, but the core of who they are, of like, is very different than the way that you approach other people, the way that you relate to other people, the things that you say or don't say, like, right? Like your knee-jerk reactions, because like your brain is not even fully formed by the time you're 18.
Even
so like
25.
By the time you get to that point, you're interacting with things differently. You're that like knee-jerk. This is why it's so much more expensive to insure teen boys driving, right?
Yeah.
Is because like their brains aren't fully formed yet, and so they're acting on like base instinct. And so that is very different than when you can think through and change and you have these new experiences. the way that you act changes, the way that you relate to other people, the way that you talk to other people. It's the intention that you put behind your actions, like who you are at your very, very core, not your actions, because actions change and you realize some actions are bad that you may not have realized that was a bad action before. Right. But again, that's the difference there is, and this is actually an argument in like actual court, like in law, is what was the intention behind it?
Intention is 3/4 of the law.
Right. And so like, that's what I'm saying changed with him. It wasn't that his behavior changed and like the things that he wanted and the way that he felt changed, because that happens to everybody. We all do that. The difference is what was motivating those actions changed completely. And it changed like overnight.
I would argue that Tay was a shitty person all along.
See, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that he behaved badly, but again, his motivate, because we get to see so much of his inner monologue of like, you know, him alone in the first season, you see that he's kind of going on like a knee-jerk reaction of like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on with me, and so I'm not paying as much attention to like how I'm affecting other people. Most Capricorns are like this. It's just a fact of Capricorns is that like they very much are like, I'm going to act how I act, and I am just not going to. Capricorns have very low empathy, I would say, as a whole, and not necessarily in a bad way. And it's not that they're malicious. Again, this is the same thing. Right. They're not sitting there going, I'm going to act this way or say this thing because I want to hurt this person. There's no
premeditation.
Right. It's not premeditated. It's like, I'm going to say this thing I want to say because I can't even conceptualize the way that these words would affect this person I'm talking to. Right. And like, I know this because I know a lot of Capricorns, and like, this was a very big sticking point in like with my sister and I, and my sister and our other sister's relationship, is that like, until I was an adult, I didn't understand that about her, that what she was saying wasn't driven by malice, that she wasn't specifically saying that to hurt me. It's that if she knew it would hurt me, she would say sorry. She would try to make it better, which is exactly what Tay does when he realizes what his actions have done and caused. He tries to make it better. He can't figure out how. He's doing this all or nothing thing, but he tries to make it better once he realizes what he's done. It was that and this is the same that happened with my sister, and why it took so long for all of our relationships to be good, is like, we didn't understand that like for her, it wasn't that she was saying those things to be mad to be mean to us. It was that if she realized she was mean to us, she'd try to fix it and she would say sorry. Yeah. It was that she just genuinely couldn't conceptualize the idea that her words, that her actions would affect us in that way. Right. And so that's kind of, and since then, since she's learned that as a grown-up, the way that she relates to the world changes, the way that she does things changes, but the intent, the core of her person has never changed. She never was malicious to people. It's just the way she handled herself that has changed, and the words that she uses and her hobbies and her, you know, things like that. And so that's what I mean by like, people change, and I accept that. And this is why like, O changes drastically in this show, but the core of who he is
the same,
never changes.
So wasn't in I Told Sunset About You, the reason that there's a riff is because O gets the part and Tay really wants it. So I think that's where I go back to. It's that like at the very beginning, you see that Tay is a selfish person. And I would argue that in I Told Sunset About You, the reason he goes to that girl when he's finally figured out, like, I like Tay, I like O. Yeah. He goes to her, but he can't really say the word. She has to be the one that's like, you like this boy. Like, you like him. Again, like, it's nice that you're coming to me and like trying to work this out. But honestly, I think everything that Tay does is from a selfish point of view.
I don't think so, though, because if it was selfish, it would be like what he did with O, where he knew he didn't like O. He knew he knew it. He knew he was into Jai at that point by that night. Right. And the night I'm referring to, I realize we've never actually said, I just feel like it's iconic and everybody knows it, is the night that he's in an acting workshop and Jai, and they've had this kiss, and Jai has told, Tay and Jai have had this kiss, and Jai tells him, try to remember what it was like the first time. No, it's not
after the kiss. It's after they go to the temple.
Right. It's after the moment.
He's told him, he's like, you need to remember what it felt like.
Yeah. He said, remember what it felt like the first time you slept with your boyfriend. Like, get those feelings back. And Tay is like, I really just don't remember that because it's been so long. We've been together for so long, all this stuff. And Jai is like, get it back. Do something to get that back. And so he goes back home. not even to his own home because they don't live together at this point. He goes into O's home, wakes him up, he's asleep, and sleeps with him because he walks in and he goes, I know what I'm going to do. And I'm doing this for Jai. I'm not doing in no way was that motivated by him loving O or wanting to reconnect with O. It was motivated by, I'm going to do this for Jai. That's malicious. And he knew that. He went into that knowing that he wasn't trying to reconnect with O. He went into that knowing that he was trying to do that to connect more with Jai.
That's so funny because I see that as Tay did it because he wanted to be better at acting, because that night he sees Jai making out with the teacher, and that's when they have dinner, and then they go to the temple, and they do have this brief moment where after they've almost been caught in the temple and they look at they have them they look at each other, which in BL, if you look at each other
you're
for
married.
2 seconds,
you're married.
That's it. So because I don't think that Tay really fell for Jai until they kissed, until he was like, oh, I'm definitely fallen out of love with O, but I haven't re-established what my next mark is.
But again, we see that though, that this is Tay's personality. He falls for people before he realizes that he's fallen for them. Same thing happened with O. And so he knows that all he knows is that he doesn't love O, and he knows, and we see him admit this, that he goes into that situation for Jai, not for O, not for himself, for Jai.
Interesting.
And so that is kind of that's the problem with that's what I mean by the core of his motivations versus with this girl, the scene that you're talking about. I don't fault him for not being able to say the words. He was trying with her. He was trying to do the right thing by someone. He just couldn't say the words because the idea of being gay was so new to him. And the idea of that, although I would argue it's never blatantly stated, but I would actually argue that Tay is bi or potentially
all of his actions, because then he goes back
potentially
to a girl.
He's pansexual bi, because he ends up dating a girl. So it's never explicitly stated, but I guess the idea of him being attracted to the same sex, I think was so just he knew it, but he couldn't say it yet, which I will never fault someone for that. And so, but the point of that is it wasn't for him that he was going to her, because if it was for him, he never would have even gone to her, right? He never told O, hey, there's something going on here. Hey, I think we need to reevaluate our relationship, right? So even if he couldn't say the words, he never went to him to try and clarify things. And that's what he did with this girl. He couldn't say it, but he was trying to do the right thing by her. And that's what I mean by the core of who he is as a person changed.
Because I think of him as a really selfish character. I also think there's a component of him that's a people pleaser. And in that moment, I think that he went to that girl, maybe not even so much as to clarify it with her, but maybe more so to confirm how he felt about O, because he goes to her after they've had that moment in the field. And I can't actually remember what happens before he goes to her to be like, oh, I think I have feelings for someone.
They just don't really hang out very much. And then there's a point where they're studying together, and he very much shuts things down. He they have very few interactions after that until he goes to her, and once he's decided, once he's made the decision that it's O, he goes to her. And again, the core of who you are is because there are selfish people that are not malicious people. That can exist, right? There are a lot of people, I would say, in my life that are very selfish, that very much all they think about is, or not all they think about, but not in a malicious way, is, well, I have to live my life and I can only be me. And if this affects you in a certain way, I can't control how you feel, that kind of thing, which is very much a selfish way to approach life, but it's also not malicious. Right?
I think maybe it depends on the context. You can't really be a very selfish person in an intimate relationship, or you shouldn't be. You absolutely can, but if you're in a committed relationship, there's a part of you that has to always consider another person. And so I think Tay, within the context of relationships with other people, he's just a shitty person, because he's like that to his friend. He's not like that just to O. He's like that to everybody in I Promised You the Moon.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, I think what makes people a shitty person or not a shitty person is their intention. But and again, it comes down to, if that person found out that what they were doing was hurtful, would they apologize? Would they feel guilty? Or not guilty, but like, would they feel regret for making this other person feel this way? Right? Like, that's what makes you a shitty person or not a shitty person, is if you've found out that what you did hurt someone, would you apologize, try to make it better, right? Like, would you admit fault, basically? Would you admit fault? If you found out that what you did hurt someone else, would you admit fault? Would you have regret about making someone else feel bad? If the answer is no, if the place that your brain goes is, well, I can't control how you feel, you're a shitty person.
Well, and Tay never admits, he says sorry, but he never admits his wrongdoing, because in that breakup scene, O is like, do you still have feelings for Jai? And he's like, I'm never gonna see Jai again. And he never admits his wrongdoing. He's never like, that was a bad situation.
Well, I mean, I don't think, I guess when I say that, I mean, I don't think that you have to like fall on your knees and you're in a confessional, but
no, but
would you try to
that,
make it, well, but it's whether or not you say it to someone, right? Like, you can understand it without saying it to someone. And I think if there's any level of, I'm sorry, I'm trying to make it better, and that doesn't happen in I Promise You the Moon, but it sure as shit happens in I Told Sunset About You. And the like, that intention, I don't think bad actions make people a bad person. We all do bad things. I do bad things all the time to my friends and my family and people that I love, but I don't mean to. And if I find out that it's something that I've done that has made someone feel bad, not only do I apologize, saying I am sorry goes a really long way. So not only do I apologize, but I try to change. I am conscious of, I'm not going to do this again. But I hope, and this is why I give other people grace, that the people that I've hurt, especially after I apologize and after I try to change, notice that, and they know, or they don't believe that I'm a bad person because I made a bad decision or acted badly. And just like I give other people this same grace, is if you act badly, but if you say you're sorry, or if you, without like being like, oh yeah, sorry, right? You know what I mean? Like, without like talking down to someone, right? Like, without talking down to someone,
right.
And you change and you try to make things better, you're not a bad person. That's the problem between I Told Sunset About You and I Promise You the Moon, is Tay acts real badly in both of them. It's the intention behind those bad actions that have changed.
Well, O is a better person than we are, because he gives Tay the benefit of the doubt and they walk into the sunset together.
This fool. Honestly, Tay's not even that cute.
Justice for Baz. Justice for Q. Literally, O had so many
Q and O should have been together. Q and O should have been together. Q and O should, you know who should be together? Baz and Q.
Yes.
Baz and Q. Hashtag Baz and Q. Those are the only two that are worth anything in this show.
It's so true. When Baz comes back in that last episode and I Promised You the Moon, I was like, Baz is too good for O. And O
Baz
is a
literally
good boy.
gets left on the side of the street and he's still a cool dude.
Oh.
Baz and Q deserve each other, actually. O, because he's so silly and is going back to Tay, he doesn't deserve Q or Baz.
I will say, the way that this show played the friendships was really, really interesting, because at no point did you get a feeling that Q necessarily was romantically into O.
You ship it, right? It's like anything else in this BL world. I ship it.
Even his reaction when Tay and O have posted that Instagram where they're like declaring that they're like reconnected. And they zoom in on Q and he just genuinely looks happy for his friend. He doesn't look like necessarily disappointed or sad. He's like, okay, my friend has made this decision. And you're like, Tay, or you deserve Q so much more.
Oh yeah, O had so many better options, but I think that the fact that he still goes back to Tay proves why he actually doesn't deserve Q or Baz.
It's true.
Q and Baz deserve each other because Q is such a wonderful friend, such a good little actor, such a good little. Q is also very cute.
Yeah.
Listen, I will say it, hella cuter than Tay.
Yes.
Just saying. Okay. God. I'm just saying.
It's true though. Their little friend group in college. Oh, that scene where
it's not all about visuals, although, you know, I'm a fan that's only into visuals. Thank you.
That scene where O is homesick and he hasn't made friends yet, and he sees this group of friends and he's like, I'm gonna go introduce myself, and then he starts crying and they're all so sweet. Oh my god, I love that scene so much. I love the friend group. If we could have just had I Promise You the Moon with
but it's just friends
group,
right? It's not even about Tay and O being romantic. It's about just friends.
I could watch
I'm into it
season after season of this friend group. This is a friend group that I want to see throughout their entire life.
Yeah,
I could do a reboot in 5 years with just this friend group.
Friend group, them like at their college reunion. Yeah,
Tay has been shitty.
I'd watch that.
O is going back to his friends.
I don't want him to. I don't want him to hurt O anymore, but I think he will. But like, I think we just don't talk about it. We don't talk about whether or not they're together, not together, whatever. We only focus on the friends because, yes, the friends were one of the few redeeming things about the show. Listen, it's true. Clearly, I have very strong feelings about the show. This is why we avoided doing this for so long. Is I was like, I'm not emotionally prepared to talk about the show because it made me so mad. Because I Told Sunset About You had such an impact on me.
Yeah.
That then when the like vibe of it changed and it turned into this like other thing, I felt personally attacked.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like it was a personal slight against me. And it wasn't. It was
which is a great moment to be like, people wrote these characters. Someone else wrote this story. It's their story to tell. Your attachment to these characters in this story are your attachment. And everyone gets their own thoughts and feelings about characters and stories, but you can't take out that energy on other people, on the original writer. And so often that happens where they're like, how dare you take these characters right? We're seeing it with Cherry Magic.
Yeah.
It's like, hey guys, you own these characters how you want to. Go write your fanfic.
And again,
do whatever.
This is how I interact with these characters and these people.
It doesn't ruin anything else. It's something totally separate.
I would never be like, "Boy, you're a bad writer and I hate you," because I don't think that's true. Right? And listen, I will say, after that episode, I did not want to see Bilkin's face for like a month. I couldn't even look at his face, and I knew it was unfair. Like, in the moment, I was like, "This is unfair." He's just an actor playing this character. In fact, he like tweeted and IG'd and stuff about like how mad he was about it too. Yeah. But I was like, I literally can't even look at his face. I'm too mad about it. Like,
I mean, you hear these stories from these actors who play really bad characters, and they will be like,
oh, it took me like so long to decide that I was okay with Kauna, like, as a person.
Yeah. I listened to this podcast and they were talking about one of the actors played a really bad dude, and he had somebody come up to him on the street and start just hitting them with her purse. And he's like apparently the nicest guy, and he was with one of the other actresses from the show who he acts bad towards. And he handled it brilliantly, because as soon as this woman realized, like, oh my god, this is an actor, not this character, she's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, you just played this really bad dude really well. And he looks at her and he goes, how bad do you want me to be?
Oh my god.
And like then just walked away. And it's one of those moments where you're like, okay, this actor is not this character, right? They're actually a really talented actor because they played this character so well.
And again, like, I say this was shitty writing, but like, actually, was it really good writing because it elicited such a strong response out of me? Maybe. Right? Like,
it's just not the writing you wanted.
Right. Like, I will say, I don't think it made any sense. Like, but that just because it didn't make sense doesn't mean the writing itself necessarily was bad, because it made me feel so strongly.
I know. I do like the line, we take screenshots from shows and we'll send them to each other almost as like reactions.
Like jokes, yeah.
And the line at the end where they're standing on the beach and he's like, for me, it's always been you. Yeah. And then for you, it's always been me. Like, they do have some icon,
and the dialogue is pretty. And I will say, the scene, again, it moves you. It moves you. The scene where he like hits him with the bouquet when he's like realized at the end, like, I've seen the behind the scenes, and poor sweet Peepee is like going through it, having to do that. But like, I was like, that really, like, I felt the emotion. Yeah. So, you know.
Listen, Ayla, to wrap this all up, Tay was just going through something.
Yeah, sure. In the first season.
This has been Let's Talk BL. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow all things Let's Talk BL at Let's Talk BL.